former student, good friend, Will. INTP preferences. Talk a little bit about INTP adventuring. Now, this may not be out on a nature trail in the woods. INTP adventures are a little bit different, but welcome to Personality Hacker.
Nice to nice to be on. My version of adventuring is I have all types of adventures in front of my computer in my room. I guess my version of adventuring has been more around consistently pivoting due to boredom into building up a set of competencies where, I went into becoming a software engineer, and then I kind of got bored with that, and I went into video editing and music production, and then into running startup and getting into like education, and then getting into like AI and blockchain, and basically every type of nerdy interest you can pretty much imagine. I'm just really, really fascinated by building up a wide plethora of skill sets and then containing them all in one person. It's like an obsession of mine almost. And so, of course, that has actually included a large amount of actual adventuring because I did need to, step into my exploration phase and all that kind of stuff. But I do find myself able to explore in the intellectual realm insofar as that is a process of building new skill sets that I can rely upon.
Now, if you're watching on YouTube right now, you're jacked, Will. Like, you're extremely, like, you clearly go to the gym, you work out. You've not only built competency in maybe mental places, but also physical capacity. And so if you're just listening to us, go watch this on YouTube. You'll see how big Will is. You're jacked with lots of muscles. So just talk a little about your experience before we get into some of the details of what we're going to talk about today, which is artificial intelligence, AI. I just want to hear a little about your experiences in an INTP who has put emphasis on your physicality and also your mentality. And my guess is, and we've talked offline, so I already know the answer, but I'm teeing you up. I'm guessing it kind of causes a little bit of challenge for you because you probably don't really fit in any particular, it probably amplifies the challenge that you already have as an INTP, weirdly enough. You'd think it would make it easier for you, but sometimes I bet it makes it harder.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing is that everybody's like, oh, well, that guy's obviously not an INTP, in the type space. But as far as how it actually came about and why I got into fitness and all that kind of stuff is that as a part of, the building skill sets and all this kind of stuff, it leans into I just kind of want to optimize everything. And it made sense to have some relationship with fitness and becoming really, really fit, because the more fit you are, the more capable you are just fundamentally, and you can think more clearly, you have more energy, and all those things made sense to me. I didn't have necessarily a natural proclivity towards, doing physical stuff, but it just made the most amount of sense to get fit because, when I was a teenager, I was incredibly awkward and couldn't really talk to anybody, but I could go and work out by myself alone, and then suddenly people kind of liked me a little bit more. I kind of got the foot in the door in the social avenues and things like that. So that was helpful for that. And I have come to learn that I have benefited a lot from being able to have a 10-year-old introverted sensing, insofar as it really allows you to habituate really useful things. And so fitness for me now is like, it's just a thing that I do, like it's almost like I couldn't not do fitness. And so my introverted thinking is kind of obsessed with the actual optimization of health and fitness. And it just happened to be an interest of mine as a teenager. And it was kind of like, well, can I be even healthier? Can I be even stronger? Can I be even better? And so there was a little bit of the intellectual interest in what could be done. And then I just did it enough whereby it became a habit, and then I just keep doing it. And so it's kind of interesting. Like it sort of looks like an obsession almost, but I don't even really think about it that much anymore. It's just what I do. And so it's kind of like I joked with Antonia about this. I benefit from passive jackness in the same way that, like economically you can have passive income, that kind of thing. And so to be honest, it's something that I really wish I could convince more people to get into, because I'm not really naturally wired to get into fitness and whatnot, but it has been unbelievable in terms of the doors it opens. Like every human, we all have these very shallow perceptions of what value is and all that kind of stuff. So the way that you look or how fit you are, regardless of somebody's economic status or whatever, I always get, dude, how do you get those biceps? Like across all strata of everything, right? And so it kind of like, it makes things easier in that fashion. Now, to the second part of what you were saying, though, in terms of what it makes it difficult to do, it makes it really difficult to get close to people or become a part of a group, because a lot of the times, like, I think like the nerds, but then when I go and want to hang out with the nerds, they're like, you don't like, but you're not really one of us, you know, like you don't look like one of us. And then if I go and hang out with the jocks, they're like, why are you so weird? You know, like, why are we talking about AI when we could be doing fun stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's unfortunately played into the, you know, you did tee me up on this, the loneliness that INTPs are going to feel just, you know, by being weirdos anyway.
Yeah.
And it really kind of doubles down on that, because it's very difficult to find people who kind of just like and accept me for who I am. And I might be projecting my own proclivities onto that as well, but it's definitely made it easier to be lonely. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is already a challenge as an INTP.
Yeah, for sure.
So the thing you use to solve it is also in some ways also a little isolating, but at the same time, it doesn't sound like you would make different choices because there's also a lot of benefits that come with it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I would love to be able to connect with people more and whatnot, but my orientation is definitely towards optimization though. And I can't deny it is better to be fit. It just is. It just feels awesome. And there's so many downstream effects, and I don't want to turn this into a fitness podcast. I won't double down on it too hard or anything like that. But I can't let myself be swayed by the difficulties that it might present, because the benefits in terms of it just makes the most amount of sense to be fit. It's just so overwhelmingly leaning in that direction.
I think in the zeitgeist right now, I'm getting the sense that people are actually pushing against that concept and message. Like there's things like fat acceptance, and there's other movements where people are trying to indicate that almost like having that perspective is playing into a more shallow way of thinking and interacting as people. And so I can almost experience somebody watching this being like, well, that's not healthy, right? That's not a good way of looking at it, because now you're pushing for this idea of almost like being obsessed with it. Mm-hmm. And considering that's becoming more and more a part of social conditioning, you still find like there's just endless benefits to, and you're not even saying taking care of your health. I think that's the diplomatic way that people say it. It's like, well, it's just taking care of your health. But you're like saying specifically, no, like being jacked, looking a certain way, that itself has benefits.
Yeah, and I mean, so there's gradations to everything, right? It's not the binary, either you have no relationship to fitness or you're jacked or something like that. There's benefits, and they basically just kind of go up to a certain point, and then if obsession is the driver of your interest in fitness, then it can tip over into the negative, because I mean, just like any obsession can tip over into the negative, regardless of how positive it might be outside of it being an obsession. And so I don't think that people should go and, if you're not naturally driven towards doing optimization for its own sake, because that's just inherently satisfying for you. You don't need to be as jacked as I. Oh my, it sounds so terrible to say. You don't need to be as jacked as I am. That's my thing. I just happen to have an interest in it, so that's fine. But I would strongly say that people could benefit more from fitness and health. Yes, that's the diplomatic way. And I don't think anybody's going to contest that. But also the looks thing, like people are just more shallow than they want to admit to themselves. Yeah. And but it's hard though to take the effort, control your diet, like all the necessary components to look as optimal as you could. And so the easier thing to do is just say like, well, everybody else needs to change their perception of things because I don't really feel good about not feeling good about my current state. And one of the things that it helps with, like, that having introverted thinking as my dominant function does for me is that I have that critical voice in my head, but it never feels denigrating, right? It's like it sees the lack of optimization in certain elements of myself, and I'm like, you could get better at this, you could get better at this, you're not that great at this, et cetera, et cetera. And I never feel bad about it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. Maybe I should focus on that. I don't feel like it right now. Okay, well, I'll focus on it later. That kind of thing. It's almost like just a very neutral dialogue in my head. Yeah. And so that's the perspective that I'm coming at this with. And I've lived in a state where I don't have as much muscle fitness, whatever it is, and I've lived in a state where I do. And even outside of being somebody who has a really strong attachment to their feelings and whatnot, I feel so much better. Like there's just a part of the way that people look at you, the way that you gain instantaneous respect, which is kind of silly. I mean, unfortunately, you also gain instantaneous, what would be like
Competition?
There's competition and people making snap judgments about you, but you can quickly dispel those negative appraisals by just being a kind, thoughtful person in front of the person. They're like, oh, okay, you seem like a pretty cool person. It's just, I cannot stress the benefits of being fit enough. Mm-hmm. And again, I feel like we're derailing this a little bit.
We are. I'm going to switch gears here.
Well, and I do want to, because I just know my introverted thinking and extroverted feeling just knows that somebody's going to be really triggered and they're going to take it out on you in a comment. They're going to be like, that guy's a jerk or he's not representing it well. And I just want to make a little comment that whenever I'm around somebody else who also uses the function of introverted thinking, it's such a relief to me. There is so much tiptoeing, I think, that people have to do in order to not, to not be offensive or to make sure that nobody's feelings are hurt. And maybe it's because I have introverted thinking, what John Beebe would call a parent position or parent function. But there's something to be said for hearing something that is true and it stinging a little bit. Right. And that doesn't mean it has to crush or be demoralizing. If it's crushing or demoralizing, it's very hard to get to the other side of that. But something that's, that's like, no, my experience is that when I wasn't jacked, the world treated me worse. And when I was, it treated me better. That's a truth. Or most people can benefit from paying a little bit more attention to, to their fitness specifically, not just their health, but specifically like the fitness aspect of it. Because, that brings into it your physical movement, that brings into it nutrients, and that sort of thing. And so I actually appreciate the fact that you're probably going to take some arrows for saying what you're saying, right? And it's a relief to me to hear people, say things that are true, and somebody's going to get offended, and it's okay, because on the other side of that, if they can contend with it and go, well, why am I getting offended by that? Like, what is it helping me reflect about myself that is maybe an area that I can attend to? Then it's actually done its job, right? And that's what truth is supposed to do.
I mean, my baby extroverted feeling does want to go and say, listen, guys, I'm just saying this because I want you to have that good feeling too. Like,
right.
But at the same time, you are not less valuable if you don't value fitness or anything like that, right? Like your value is defined by, I can't define that in a sentence or anything like that, right? But it's just, hey, I've found this thing that's really, really, really high leverage in terms of like the time is going to go by in a day, regardless of what you do in that day.
Yeah.
And an unbelievably high leverage thing you could do is spend an hour of that day doing something related with health and fitness, or, orienting your life around a way that creates that positive relationship with health and fitness. And yeah, just as like a leverage piece, like that's something you should focus on. If it's something that you keep saying like, oh, but that doesn't really matter because I'm more of an intellectual or something like that. It's like, yeah, it helps you be smarter though. Like I think more clearly. I think I have more energy, like all of these positive things, which you already know, by the way. And the problem with health and fitness stuff is everybody knows that they should do it. And so as soon as you start talking about it, it just ends up going through the circuitry that they've already created a relationship with. And so they're like, oh, health and fitness, like they don't even have to think about it. It's just a topic that they've already done the thinking on. They've either slotted themselves as a fitness person or not, or I need to get around to that. And then that's just a repeat pattern every time I need to get around to that, all that kind of stuff. So despite it having nothing to do with this particular podcast topic or anything like that, as a side note, you should get into fitness.
I'll tell you, I think it has a lot to do with it, quite frankly. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment. So